And now, live from San Francisco, it's Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560, KSFO.
Hour number 2 right here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. If you're just joining us, thank you for doing that. We've got a guest this hour here on the program. I am Barbara Simpson. This is the Barbara Simpson program, Saturdays and Sundays from 4 until 7 right here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. Going on to our 15th year. How about that, folks? Phone number is 808-5600, 808-5600. Invite you to be part of it. I mentioned earlier we have a guest this hour about a subject that, and it doesn't matter where you live. If you live in the Bay Area, if you live in a different part of California, if you are listening from a different state, and a lot of people are or will be, the terminology that we will be talking about this hour applies across the country, and quite honestly, it applies almost across the world because there are aspects of it and variations of it going on in other countries as well. It's part of an international agenda through the UN and through a number of people who have been promoting it over the years under the guise of environmentalism, under the guise of sustainable development, under the guise of saving the earth. You know, whatever hat you want to put on it, it all comes under the same rubric of a threat to private property and a threat to individual rights. And it ties in a pretty good way with all of these demonstrations around the country as well. They're all interrelated. The philosophy behind these demonstrations on Occupy Wall Street and all over, what's going on in England, you heard on the news at the top of the hour, in Rome, and in other countries, even the Arab Spring and what's going on over there, which has nothing to do with freedom for the people. It just means more government control. Perfect example was, as I mentioned before, was the attack by the Egyptian army against Christians in Egypt. Not mobs, not Muslim mobs, the army attacking citizens because of their religion. So we have a guest with us this hour, is a woman who is actually, she's called the program a number of times, and we've talked as a caller, but she has given me a lot of information of her activities, and she's dead on what she's doing. And I decided, and she certainly was willing to be on the program today to inform you, because this is what's going on right here in the Bay Area, but it is going on all across the state and all across the country. And I used those two phrases, smart growth, which is just all over, and sustainable development. And it just sounds so warm and fuzzy and really nice. The sustainable development, we want everything to be sustained, to continue, to be healthy and safe and all that good stuff. But there is a more serious aspect to it, which is what we're going to be discussing with my guest, Mimi Steele. She grew up in Pennsylvania. She lived in various places around the United States, England, and Germany growing up. Went to the Silicon Valley in 1981, working in the high-tech industry. And is still working even now. She graduated from Grinnell College in math and psychology. She has an MS in math education and an MBA in marketing. She's a private pilot, and she is a serious competitor in dog agility with Mecco, the Australian Shepherd. So she's a dog person. No, I knew I liked her. There you go. As a team, she and her dog hold 8 titles with the AKC, which is quite a spectacular achievement in and of itself. She also was in the U.S. Air Force for 8 years. She was a captain in telecommunications. As an Air Force officer, she tells me, she took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Remember that. Enemies, foreign and domestic. Remember that got Hank Williams in trouble because he called Obama and Biden the enemy? Some people think so. In any event, according to Mimi Steele, that oath does not have an expiration date. And she wants to defend the right to property that's guaranteed in the Constitution against the illegal encroachment of government and NGOs under those deceptive guises of, as I said, smart growth and sustainability. She is with us right now, and I'm happy to have you on as a guest. Mimi Steele, thanks for being with us.
Barbara, thank you for that great introduction, and also thank you for making the connection between smart growth and sustainability and what's going on with the protesters, because it's pretty scary stuff that's happening in our country.
It is spreading, and it's getting worse, and it's getting more dangerous as people buy the line. For the sake of folks who simply don't know anything about this, and they just have heard the word in their communities. And by the way, when you sent me some information, and you were talking about the United Nations and the definition, the United Nations Conference on Human Settlements, the Habitat 1, which was held in Vancouver in 1976, the preamble to Agenda Item 10 on the conference report. And I just want to, if you will, I just want to take a minute, folks. Listen to this. This is the United Nations view of property. Land cannot be treated like an ordinary asset controlled by individuals and subject to the pressures and inefficiencies of the market. Private land ownership is a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, what? Private land ownership. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. The provision of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for the people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable. In other words, lose control of private property. That's essentially what they're saying, isn't it, Mimi?
Exactly, and I'd like to contrast that with what our founders talked about. John Locke, who was one of the principal philosophical people behind the founders, said that the great and chief end of government is the preservation of property. John Adams says property must be secured or liberty cannot exist. And George Washington said private property and freedom are inseparable. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that was then ensconced in Article 5 of the Constitution, where you can't be deprived of property without due process of law.
Which was why there was such an uproar on the part of constitutional adherents when you had the Supreme Court ruling about the land in Connecticut, when they said that the town could take over private property and give it to a commercial interest to develop. That is, it just pulls the rug out from under what the Constitution says.
Absolutely, and when you're talking in those terms, you're talking about something called eminent domain, which is legal under the Constitution if someone is properly reimbursed, and it's also supposed to be something that's done in the public. The Kelo decision was something that was actually done to take property from a private citizen and give it to a developer because they thought they could get more taxes out of it.
Right.
That's a complete perversion. But the other thing I want to point out is there's something that's going on all across the country that's even more perverse than eminent domain. And it's takings that are happening administratively, and they're happening because of sustainable development and smart growth. So if I could go to a definition of those two.
Yes, I was going to ask you so that people who really are new to this, what do they mean when they say smart growth?
Okay, you can go to Wikipedia and just Google smart growth. And smart growth is an urban planning and transportation theory that concentrates growth in compact, walkable urban centers to avoid sprawl and advocates compact, transit-oriented, that's very key, walkable, bicycle-friendly land use, including neighborhood schools, complete streets, and mixed development with a range of housing choices. Smart growth values long-range regional considerations of sustainability over short-term focus.
Okay, now that's the one term, smart growth. What is sustainable development?
Okay, sustainable development is, again, from Wikipedia, it's a pattern of resource use that aims to meet human needs while preserving the environment so that the needs can be met not only in the present but also in the future. It ties together a concern for the carrying capacity of natural systems with the social challenges facing humanity.
Okay, now tell us what carrying capacity means. When I was working for Captain Jacques Cousteau a few years ago, I was working with a number of organizations with the UN at that time because he was getting ready to go down to the UN conference in Rio. And I came across, for me, that was my first experience with this carrying capacity and what that means. What does that mean?
You know, I think carrying capacity seems to be in the eye of the beholder, because from what I've been able to tell, when you look at it in the context of sustainable development and smart growth, it's being determined by people in power who decide what the carrying capacity of the land should be.
But what do they mean, carrying capacity? In other words, they're saying how many people can live on this land and the land can sustain them, right?
Exactly. How many people can live on the land?
Okay. And so when you have a situation where you have this smart growth and sustainable development, and they keep talking about these transit villages, what they really are trying to control is where we live and how we live, right?
Absolutely. You got it right on the button.
Explain it a little bit.
So what's happening in the Bay Area specifically, and it's happening all around the country, is that there is a plan now called the One Bay Area Plan that's a 25-year plan to combine housing, transportation, and land use. And they're going to determine over the next 25 years where people can build, where they live, and how they're going to commute. And the net of it is they're trying to take people out of their cars. They're trying to force them in the transit villages. They want to make sure that they work within a certain area of where they live, that they shop in the same area. If you look around the Bay Area, you'll see a lot of transit villages with shops underneath and then apartments or condos on top of them.
Right, which is a sort of a European kind of way of looking at it. But, of course, in Europe, first of all, it's older, and secondly, they have a lot less land than we have in this country. The word, because we have a lot of land that has become a bad word, is the whole issue of a sprawl. That is just a vile word in the eyes of these people.
Yeah, and, you know, I want to point out that what's really interesting in this whole thing is they control the language. So they lull you in with terms like sustainable development and smart growth, and we're the sprawl people, so they're the anti-sprawl people. You know, they talk about affordable housing, equity, social justice. All of those are terms to get you off your guard and have you not really understand the implications of what they're doing, because it's the implications when you ask the second or third level questions about what does this mean to me and what does it mean to my life. That's when you start to realize that there's something terribly wrong with this whole plan.
We're going to take a break now, Mimi, so hang on. I don't want to lose you. If you're just joining us here on KSFO, I'm speaking with my guest, Mimi Steele. She is with the SF Bay 912, and also she's the state coordinator of it. And she has another organization which we'll tell you about as well, and lots of ways that you can contact her to get information. They can also present programs. If you want to learn about this, and I would urge you to get in touch with the SF Bay Area group to find out about the meetings they have and about the lectures that they can present to you, because no matter, I live in a small community. I have gone to our town meetings, and these words are bandied about, and they're treated like the Holy Grail. Is far more involved in that. Your towns have committed you to these things, and I'll bet you 99.99% of the time it was not a vote of the people. It was by the few members of your town council, city council, your mayor, whomever got you into it, and you don't know what you're into. Mimi Steele will lift the veil, if you will, on what does all this mean, and who are the they she keeps talking about. We'll ask her that when we come back on KSFO. Barbara Simpson here in Hot Talk 560 KSFO. We're talking about a variety of related issues, and we're looking at the UN view of property. And you can say, well, what does it have to do with me? A lot, because there is this, it's called ICLEI, International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. And I have a list here of the number of cities that have signed up for this. And I look on there and I see my little community is on there. If you're curious about yours, you can give us a call and ask us. But the fact remains is, what are you getting into when they signed up for it, when your town involved you in this and you have no idea? My guest is Mimi Steele, and we're talking about the organization that she is. She is with the SFBay 912 group and a new organization called Citizens for Sustainable Liberty. And just so you realize that this is not totally a Republican Tea Party kind of group, there is a woman called Rosa Corey, who is a Democrat, and she's organized Democrats Against UN Agenda 21. So she is united with these organizations trying to fight this, which is really an attempt to tell us where you live, how you live, where you work, what your transportation is, and they will control it. And that's my next question to my guest, Mimi Steele. When we were talking the last few minutes, Mimi, you kept talking about they controlling the language. Who's the they you're talking about?
Well, there are a variety of people that are doing this. The International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives puts out templates, basically, that tell cities how they're supposed to get involved in sustainability and what they can do in their town. So once you sign up with this organization, you get basically a blueprint that can be used. So they're one of the theys. Another group of the theys are, unfortunately, our regional, non-governmental, non-elected agencies, such as the Association of Bay Area Governments. The acronym is ABAG.
Mm-hmm, and we hear about them all the time here in the Bay Area.
They do some underhanded things. And then MTC, which is Metropolitan Transportation Commission. That's another group of theys. And then the third major group of theys are people on your city council and in your planning department. And I will say about those people that some of them don't really understand completely the implications of what they're signing up for. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, because this is a very insidious kind of policy that they're putting in place. And a lot of people have come to us and said, gee, I had no idea that this is what I was signing up for. It sounded so good.
Exactly. Now, you sent me this list of California cities signed up for ICLEI, which is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, out of the UN. On what basis, when they sign up, what does that mean when your city is signed up? What are they committing that community to?
Well, the impetus behind signing up is that, unfortunately, our state has passed two laws, AB 32, which is California's cap and trade,
okay,
and SB 375, which is our carbon emissions law. And so ICLEI uses those two laws to come to a city and basically say, we can help you implement mostly SB 375 because you need to reduce your carbon emissions. In fact, if you look at the plans, they want carbon emissions reduced by 80% by the year, I think it was 2050 or something like that. 80% below 1990 levels. Now, I don't know how you do that without deindustrializing the area, but that's the objective.
What are some of the suggestions that communities do? Like what?
Well, they have to go in and measure their carbon emissions. That's one thing that they do. And then the other thing they do is they implement different planning things. So some of the planning things involve, I don't know if you've ever been to Mountain View, but you see all of these roundabouts and you see tree-lined streets. It looks nice. But what they're doing is they're trying to get cars out of the downtown areas. Mm-hmm. And so there's a template that says you do this thing called traffic calming, which is you're reducing the numbers of cars, and you're making it very difficult for people to drive. You're setting up your town so that there's a transit village in the area. And I want to point out on this, I mean, this is very disturbing, I think, it's going to be to a lot of communities once they realize what's going on. They just changed the rule, and as of January, the funds that used to be given to local communities to take care of their potholes and to fix their streets, those are now coming through ABAG and MTC. And what they're going to do is they're going to come to a community like Saratoga or Orinda or someplace like that, and they're going to say, if you want your funds, you have to put a transit village here in your town.
So in other words, in order to get money to fix your roads, you have to buy into one of their plans for the transit villages.
Exactly. Now, they're not giving you any money for schools. They are not looking at the impact on the community. They're just pushing on all of these communities to make sure that they go with this high-density housing. That's another component of it. It's the high-density housing near transit villages and getting people out of their cars, using mass transit, getting people off the land.
Well, I'm very familiar with the traffic calming idea, and I've seen it in some East Bay cities where they have redone the streets. And they've narrowed the lanes of traffic, making it harder to get through, and of course, creating slower traffic. There's no question about it. They've made it harder to turn corners because they have, I don't know what you call the turnouts on the corners, but they stick out into the intersection. And things like this are going on. It's a very subtle kind of thing, but I think it's insidious because it just shows how they're sneaking it in, and most people aren't even aware that it's happening.
Absolutely. That's really part of the problem. Nobody voted for this. They actually have a lot of what I would really call very deceptive practices. There's a requirement on this One Bay plan, which is the 25-year plan that I was talking about earlier, 25-year regional plan. There's a requirement that they get public input for that plan. What they've been doing to get public input is they'll advertise and they'll go to low-income communities and minority communities, and they'll ask for their input, but they don't come to the taxpayers who are paying the bill. And there's another component of this, which is the social justice crowd. Part of what they are trying to achieve, back to that UN definition of property, is they're trying to achieve social justice. And they do that by controlling where people live and making it possible for low-income people, for example, to be in a transit village in Saratoga.
Be interesting to see what happens with this. Got a lot of people on the line, and we have so much more to talk about with my guest. Her name is Mimi Steele. We're talking about San Francisco Bay 912 Project. You started another organization as well. What is that one, Mimi?
Yes, it's called Citizens for Sustainable Liberty. And the reason we chose those terms is that nobody's really standing up for the Constitution these days. Nobody's standing up for liberty. And so we chose that term because everybody likes the term sustainable. That sounds good.
It sure does.
But so we think it's more important to have sustainable liberty, because that's where we're going. That's where we need to be, rather than this sustainable development, which is actually the opposite.
Yeah, and looking at this, the list, I can't read the whole list, but Alameda, Albany, Amador County, American Canyon, Antioch, Arroyo Grande, Atascadero, Belvedere, Benicia, Berkeley, Beverly Hills, Inglewood, Irvine, Lafayette, Lake Elsinore, Lakewood, Lawndale, La Mirada, Livermore, Los Altos Hills. I'm just skipping around here. Moraga, Morro Bay, Mountain View, Murrieta, Napa County, Napa, sometimes the whole county, Los Angeles County. It's huge. I mean, you're not talking about every little community. You're talking about the whole county is locked into this.
Yes, and, you know, I really hate to tell people this because it's pretty depressing, but California is actually the worst state for the numbers of cities that have signed up for this stuff. And I think, the last count, I think we had over 150 cities in California. And unfortunately, even most of those are in the Bay Area.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it shouldn't surprise us, actually, but we're at the heart of the whole thing. We're going to take a quick break. If you're on the line waiting to talk to Mimi Steele, stay there. We'll get to your calls right after this as we continue on KSFO. My name is Barbara Simpson. Barbara Simpson here in Hot Talk 560 KSFO 808-5600. We're talking with Mimi Steele about, in essence, it's a takeover of private property not only in California, but in the country. It's an attempt, and they're making enormous inroads, particularly in California, and particularly in the Bay Area, because we are just so green. We just want to preserve everything. Mimi Steele is my guest. And Mimi, got a bunch of people on the phone, so let's get some calls in first, because I've got a ton of questions, but I know our listeners probably do too. Renee in Sunnyvale, you're on KSFO with Barbara Simpson and Mimi Steele. Hello?
Hello, this is Renee, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was, Barbara, I lived for more than 4 decades in the left. I was a democratic socialist, and I know many things that average Americans do not know. I am an American citizen since a long time ago. I came to Ohio State in the 60s, late 60s.
Okay. What country were you from, Renee?
I was born in El Salvador.
Okay.
And exactly 32 years ago, I directed a coup d'etat to implant a socialist system in El Salvador in 1979. So I had been a militant and an operative of the left, or for the left, for a long time. I abandoned the left. I left the left about 25 years ago. But I know what the left is. I know what is going here in the United States. I was a member of the Peace and Freedom Party. And when I was in college, I was a member of the Students for the Democratic Society.
Oh, boy. So you know what it's like on the inside, huh?
Oh, yeah. I know. I saw those guys. I used to go to the cells in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in Columbus, Ohio, and also in Pittsburgh.
So you're saying that what's happening now is exactly what happened in El Salvador and happens in leftist countries?
No. What I'm saying is that what you are seeing now, this Occupy Wall Street, is not absolutely something spontaneous. This, when I was in the left, we used to say, "Oh, one day America is going to be a socialist country." We used to toast at it, We used to, let's talk, let's have a chat. Yeah, we would, have a chat of booze, But we knew that it was kind of BS. That is happening now. It's happening now. Some people say, Obama is a liberal. No, Obama is not a liberal. Or some people say, he's a socialist. No, he's not a socialist. Some other people say, no, he's a Marxist. No, he's a Marxist-Leninist, which people don't understand what it is.
Exactly. Listen, Renee, thank you for reinforcing that. I appreciate it. We're certainly going to talk more about that. There is no question. Let's go to Kevin in Santa Rosa and see what he has to say on this. Hey, Kevin, you're on KSFO with Barbara Simpson and Mimi Steele.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Mimi. Good to talk with you.
Go ahead.
One of the things that just kind of makes my head explode is when I found out about what ABAG was doing with there's an initiative that they're putting in place where if right now they control. And correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's 100 yards out from any waterway. And you have to get approval from ABAG to do any development within that area.
Okay.
And what they've done is they've taken the assumption that global warming is going to happen. The Bay is going to rise by 55 inches, and that waterway obviously is going to expand out. And so they've come back and said, we now have control of what's going to happen before it's happened. And you have to get approval from us for development because all this area is going to be underwater, and we're not going to put funds, we're not going to allow building to happen because those buildings will eventually be underwater.
Now, the people who own that adjacent property obviously are not going to be reimbursed financially.
Of course not. Yeah. In fact, actually, their policy statement when you go on their website is that Berkeley will basically flood. San Francisco will basically be gone. They've actually said we're not going to put resources towards those cities to save them.
Okay, let's have Mimi react to that. Mimi, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I saw that position that they stated, and it's really ironic because what they'll do, he's correct. What they're concerned about sea level rising, but the really interesting thing, and this is where the game is played, is there was a developer that they like that wanted to do a development in that area. Mm-hmm. So they've made special concessions for that developer. And that's the way these things work. You have a lot of power concentrated in the hands of very few people, and there's a lot of graft and corruption that's going on behind the scenes for people trying to position themselves to get their projects approved.
Was it ABAG that sponsored some type of meeting or conference or something, and they paid, was it Bill Clinton, a large sum of money to come and speak?
Yes, it's coming up. It's October 21st, and your tax dollars are paying for it, but you as the public are not invited to it.
How much money are they paying him? Do you remember?
The whole deal is $250,000. I think his fee is $150,000, and I think MTC and ABAG are chipping in like $75,000.
And where does ABAG get its money in MTC?
It gets it from us. It gets us from bridge tolls and from taxes, and that brings up another issue. They hired a public relations firm for $105,000 to come up with the proper wording that they can put on the ballot to get you to agree to a 10-cent gas tax hike. And they take these gas taxes, and again, they're supposed to be putting them into roads, but what they do is they divert them into the public transportation.
Well, you said earlier, though, that if the local communities, if they've signed up for these things, if they want to get their roads fixed, they have to commit to some of these public transit things. So, yeah, the money will go to roads only if you agree to make some changes in your town.
Right.
So it's a lot of arm twisting going on with a smile.
That's right. It's the fist in the velvet glove.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Julie in San Rafael. Where are you, Julie? Julie, there you are. Hi, Julie in San Rafael. You're on KSFO with Barbara and Mimi Steele.
Oh, hi, Barbara.
Hi. Go ahead.
I wanted to make a point that I'm on a committee for long-term planning in one of the smaller communities in Marin County, and it seems to me that these initiatives are trying to change the character of our small communities. They do want to encourage development. This is not an environmentally friendly thing to do. It's this weird idea of this kind of this liberal guilt that we're living in these lovely small communities and we have to be more, open to other to people who, have lower paying jobs. We want to redo our zoning so we can build these transit villages with the utopian idea that people are going to not be using their cars somehow to drive their kids to school or to go shopping. And it's just a ridiculous notion. I think the message needs to get out there that this is not an environmentally friendly thing to do, and they are trying to kind of equalize these small communities so we look more like the Emeryvilles and the San Franciscos. And I would encourage your guest, Mimi, to really get that message out there.
It's a good point. Thank you very much for that, Julie, because there really is an attempt to change what communities look like, whether people want to or not, and they're using they're using money as the tool to do it, and I have seen it just even in my own community where the powers that be in the town will cave because there's money involved.
Correct. And one of the things really that got me involved in this was I found a quote from one of the letters from MTC, and it basically said that their plans had a strong emphasis on social equity, and they had a methodology known as the 175% income redistribution.
What does that mean?
That means that they want to put people in your town that have different income levels so that it levels out the playing field in terms of the number of wealthy people versus not wealthy people in the town. They're redistributing wealth by moving people of low income into high income areas.
Ann and Steve and Dale and Craig and Bill and all the others on the line, stay on the line. If we don't get to you this hour, Mimi can stay over the top because there are a couple of other aspects of this that we need to cover, so we will do that. We're talking about this business of smart growth, this business of sustainable development. We're talking about the power of ABAG and the MTC, the power that those organizations, which are non-elected, operating on taxpayer money, have a right to control the way we live and do business and the future of our communities. It is very insidious, and it's going on all the time. Let's get another call in here. Mimi, Ann is calling us from Berkeley. Hello, Ann. You're on the air on KSFO.
Hello. Mimi, my daughter and I met you at Cattleman's restaurant in September. Barbara, I'm glad you have her on.
Me too. Go ahead with your question.
Okay. One other backdoor way in this project that they've come up with is the smog controls, how they keep raising the levels on your vehicles, and even after your vehicles are at the top of their qualifications, their emissions for that vehicle when that vehicle was made, they've raised the levels.
Oh, they do it. They do it all the time. They do it all the time.
That your engines for an older vehicle has to literally be changed. I'm one of those, and my income is very low, and I have an old vehicle, but it's not old enough that to be qualified as an antique. But yet, my mechanic says in order to make it past smog now, I have to get whole new engines and everything else put into it.
Let me have Mimi respond to that. Thank you, and I appreciate that. Mimi, what about that? Are they also related to the smog controls?
Yes, it has to do with the carbon emissions issues. And there's another player in this whole thing called CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board. It's really a very insidious web that's being woven around all of us, and we're not, we see little bits and pieces of it. We never voted for it. We never were aware of it, but they're tightening the noose. And they really, I remember Ann, and I thank her for calling. A lot of truckers have been hit with this as well. They've had to change out their diesel engines at great expense just to drive in California. And yes, it's all part of the same game. It's government people exerting undue control over your life.
And you mentioned the diesel. Those were new regulations that were put in, and it really affected truckers particularly. And if you have a small outfit where they only have one or two trucks, for them to come in and say you've got to simply put a whole new engine and exhaust system in your truck, you can't afford to do that. So in essence, you're putting these guys out of business.
That's exactly right, and that's part of the plan. But push everybody into government employment or on welfare, and you have a docile population. I would encourage people, if they haven't looked at it in a while, to watch Dr. Zhivago again, because that's where we're going.
I don't want to. We were talking about that a couple of weeks ago on the program. By the way, since you are going to stay over the top of the hour, so everybody on the line, stay there. I promise you I'll get to your calls after the news. But I want you, Mimi, to tell us about the event on November 5th. Saturday, November 5th, from noon until 4 p.m., having to do with private property and the workshop on this One Bay area. What does that involve, and what can people do if they want to attend?
We've teamed up with the East Bay Tea Party. Heather Goss runs that group, and they've been very effective at educating people as to what's going on with the One Bay area and how to attend these visioning meetings and have an impact where they really do have to realize that not everybody agrees with this. And so we have a 4-hour, we call it a property rights tactical training seminar, and the first half of it is just an explanation by me first talking about the One Bay Area Plan, and then Heather talks about the Delphi technique, which hopefully we can get into after the top of the hour.
Yes.
In the visioning sessions. And then so that's the first 2 hours, and then the second 2 hours is a workshop where we actually do role play and teach people what they can do. And I'll tell you, the reason I got involved in this, Barbara, is it's very empowering. People locally can do something about this. You can't impact Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer, but you can sit across from your city mayor and your city council, and you can make a difference.
Yeah, and it's important. Now, this is being held on Saturday, November 5th from noon until 4. It's at the Veterans Memorial Hall on Park Avenue in Cotati. It is free. If people would like to make a donation to pay for the meeting space, that would be very welcome. And you can go to, you have to RSVP C. Tomlinson at northbaypatriots.com. The letter C, then Tomlinson, Tomlinson at northbaypatriots.com. We'll mention that again in the next hour. This is sponsored by the North Bay Patriots. Heather Gass, as my guest just said, East Bay Tea Party, and Mimi Steele, the SF Bay 912 Project. And that is my guest now. They'll be talking about understanding the opposition, countering their language, researching this, talking to your neighbors, what these visioning sessions are. As a matter of fact, I've been to a couple of those, and you talk about brainwashing techniques. It's absolutely fascinating how they do that, and you'll explain that to us in the next hour, right, Mimi?
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that for those of you who are interested, and you should be, this whole issue of Acorn getting involved and at some of these ABAG meetings, and some of these people who are involved that perhaps shouldn't be. Van Jones is a name that comes to mind, and the whole thing, it's all just one. Everything's the same, isn't it? Everything is a part of everything. They break it up into pieces, and people don't realize what's being done to them.
Barbara, it's kabuki theater, as Heather says. You know, that you have this little puppet show going on around you, and most people are kind of lulled into it, and they don't really understand what's happening. And you know, if we don't wake up, we're gonna be herded cattle.
Yeah, and I'm going to put you on hold, Mimi. Thank you, and you will stay on. So go get yourself a cup of tea, and we'll come back right after the news. Steve and Bill and Dale and Craig and the others on the line, stay there. I will get to you right off the top. I'm Barbara Simpson. We're going to continue on this because this is incredibly important. You know, we can sit and talk about international issues, and those are important too. This is stuff that is going on right now, slightly below the radar. Most people are not aware of it. And it's affecting every one of us, me and you and everybody, and we're paying for it, and they're taking away our freedoms. I'm Barbara Simpson. This is KSFO.
And now, live from San Francisco, it's Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560, KSFO.
Hour number 3 right here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. I am Barbara Simpson. This is the Babe in the Bunker speaking to you Saturdays and Sundays from 4 until 7. Doing a special, wow, I can't believe, Mimi Steele, we have a full board of calls here. We really touched some good buttons out there. And I'm talking to my guest from last hour, Mimi Steele. I asked her to stay over the top because we had so many calls, and over the news, we got a lot more calls coming in, so we will take those. The number is 808-5600. Try to get as many in as we can. This is Hot Talk 560 KSFO. I'm with you Saturdays and Sundays, by the way, from 4 until 7. So we'll be back again tomorrow and every weekend, and hope you'll be part of it. My guest is Mimi Steele. She is founder of SF Bay 912, San Francisco Bay 912 Project, and also Citizens for Sustainable Liberty. We're talking about smart growth, sustainable development, the role of the government in taking our rights away. And there are ways that you can find out about this. There are ways that you can go to various events to learn how to interpret the language and to understand what is being done to you, to your community, to your future, to your children. You may agree or disagree, but the point is you have to know about it. And part of the problem, Mimi, is, am I right, that most people don't even know about it?
Yes, you're correct. And I think the comment I want to make about that is that we're a lot of hardworking people. I have a full-time job, and most of the people in this movement have full-time jobs. And we don't really have the time to be watching over our public officials' shoulders at what they're doing. And most of us are pretty trusting people. We figure people are in there and they're going to do the right thing. And what's really disconcerting about this whole process is that is not what's happening. The people that are in these government jobs and in these supposedly public service jobs are in it for themselves, and they're not looking at the long term. I don't think they care about what happens their children or the future of liberty in this country. They're just on a mission to control.
What got you into this in the first place?
You know, I started with a conversation with Dr. Michael Kaufman. We had him out here about a year ago.
Oh, he's been on my program. He's wonderful.
You were kind enough to interview him, and he talked about the property rights issue. And at the time, when he was talking about it, I was thinking more academically and theoretically about it. And then we stumbled on this One Bay Area plan, and I looked at it and I thought, whoa, this is it. Everything that he said is really happening, and it's here, and it's time to stand up and do something about it. And so, you know, as I told you in my bio, I'm here to support and defend the Constitution, and it is being ripped to shreds. And in fact, I might have even sent you a cartoon. I have a cartoon that I call the windbags of ABAG, and it's the guys from ABAG and MTC sitting around a table, and they're shouting at the private citizen about, you know, sustainable development and smart growth, and the citizen is getting overrun. And we have been to those meetings, Heather and I and her team, and that's exactly what it feels like. They're just gonna roll over you.
Well, you know, you sent me two cartoons, and both of them are great. One of them says "One Bay" in quotes on the wrong track, and you've got a street, and on the left side you have like railroad tracks, BART tracks, and it says "Stack and Pack Transit Station Number 4." And it's got all of this high-rise housing and the urban village kind of thing, the transit village. And then on the right-hand side, it's got this very spacious, and people in bicycles, by the way, alongside the railroad tracks. And then on the other side of that is this beautiful Parkway Road with cars, the Silicon Valley Foundation, Greenbelt Alliance, One Bay Area, ABAG, the bureaucrat estates, exclusive living with the walled community and the palm trees, so that they will live in the nice places, but the rest of us have to be shoved into these transit villages, which is really, that's really what they're doing. And they had something in the Contra Costa Times last week, Mimi, you may have seen it, about a transit village, I think it's in Concord, if I'm not mistaken, where they built this thing, and of all the store, the retail space that's there, there's only one occupied so far, and I believe they said it was a Starbucks, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, they can't even get the thing rented because people really aren't interested, but boy, they pushed it through, and the land is taken up, the buildings are built, the jobs that were there are gone, there's no retail, and not many people have moved in.
And you know what's really sad about this whole thing is that they go out and they recruit low-income people or people from the ethnic minorities to agitate for this type of development, promising them that they're going to really end up better off. And the reality is they're going to be the people that are worst hit by this because they're never going to be able to afford a home. They're never going to be able to afford a car. They're just going to be little serfs going to their job in their local area, walking or biking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really sad. And that gets into this social justice thing. I don't know if you want to go there.
Well, you know, I do want to. We could go on. I'm afraid we probably should have done 3 hours on this today. But you know what? We'll do it again. But you know, you mentioned the social justice, and one question that came to mind, and that if we don't get to it today, we'll talk about it next time. Has to do with the role of the churches in this, because I hear this a lot in my church, and I'm sure a lot of other churches do too, where they're trying to guilt you into supporting these programs, don't they?
Yeah, that's correct. I think there's a real distinction that needs to be made, and a lot of people don't have the understanding to make it, and that is social justice versus equal justice. We're a country founded on equal justice, which means no matter who you are, when you walk into a court or justice is being served, you know, justice is blind. She makes a decision based on the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
The rule of law. Social justice is not based on the rule of law. So, and also, social justice is collective justice. It's not looking at you, Barbara Simpson, as an individual. It's looking at you as whatever category they want to put you in.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong. And I really, you know, obviously I'm a fan of Glenn Beck. He always says that what God wants you to do, you know, the Good Samaritan, he didn't tell people to walk by, see somebody there, and say, "Hey, the government will be around to help you in 20 minutes." You know, what justice should be in the church should be us as individuals helping other individuals.
Because we want to, not because somebody's forcing us, no question. Let's get to some of the calls, and we'll get to some of my questions as we move along, too. Steve in Walnut Creek, are you there? Go ahead, please.
Hi, Barbara. Yeah, you got a little bit past my segue, but...
That's okay. Go ahead.
Pleasant Hill, just down Treat Boulevard from me, at the Pleasant Hill BART station, they built one of these transit villages.
Yeah.
And let me describe it quickly. It's about 5 or 6 acres, 3 huge structures, 7 to 8 stories tall.
Wow, that's tall.
Oh, yeah. All wood frame, very environmentally sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And this place is a ghost town. They have 30 at least storefronts on the street level. And that's what I was talking about. One of them's a Starbucks.
Oh, that's the one I read about in the paper then.
Yep.
That's it?
And
Wow.
There's one other eating place in there, and you drive by this place in the evening, and it is dark.
Wow.
They have not been able to get anybody in there. And my 2 questions were, who developed this? Where did they get the money? And is there any kind of subsidy for people to actually live in this place?
Oh, those are good questions. Take those on the air, please.
I will.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a very good question because it brings up something that I was thinking of. Mimi, how can somebody find out who developed something like that and where they got the money for it?
It's probably if you look at your city website, you can probably go there and look at agenda items and see what the approval process is. Generally in these things, what happens is a developer goes and presents his plan, and it's approved by the planning department. Most of these things are subsidized, and you're paying for it. It's your tax dollars
Sure.
you're paying for it. From some kind of government grant. It could either come from a federal grant or a state grant, or it could be the city money being put into it. But yes, these things are very highly subsidized. And the other ironic thing about it is they're subsidizing these things, but then they waive all of the requirements for reducing greenhouse gases.
Aha.
So the very thing, the very reason they're doing this is they waive it for their pet projects. And there's a lot of corruption in this because, there's certain developers that are greasing certain people's hands with these deals.
No question about it. And that, it brought up something that I thought of earlier when we were talking of this whole business about low-income housing. How do they define that?
It's whatever they want it to be.
That's what I was afraid of.
The answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, I have looked into it myself, and I know in terms of various things that have been around where I am, and I ask about that, how do you define it? And then does this house that they're going to buy for below market or build for below market, because it encourages the builders to do that, then does it ever revert to market value? And who gets the difference in the profit? Nobody has those answers. And I've asked people on all levels. They do not have those answers. I think you're right, Mimi. They just make it up as they go along.
Barbara, those are great questions, and I want to say that this really illustrates the problem with this whole thing. When you start asking second and third level questions, nobody really knows, and they're spending all of this tax money, and they're completely discombobulating everything about private property rights, and we haven't even scratched the surface on this. And yet they keep doing it. And there's a really great website called American Dream Coalition. And if you go to AmericanDreamCoalition.com, on the left-hand side, it'll say Smart Growth Disasters. And the places where they have done smart growth, Portland is one of the ones that they talk about, and the other place is San Jose. It's been a miserable failure. The exact opposite of what they want to have happens. It increases the prices of housing. It increases carbon emissions. All the things that they say they're preventing is what actually they end up doing. But you ask them those questions, and nobody will define it. They say, "Too bad, that's the law. we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, and the money is tied to that, because I know that in terms of certain developments, if a guy comes in and wants to put up a housing development, the state requires a certain percentage, because the communities have signed on to these things, certain percentages of the homes. They don't have to be built. They just have to promise they're going to do it, which proves it's a farce to begin with. But they do that, and the developer has to do it. He's got to plan the development so that you have these low-income houses. But what does that mean when you're building houses that are going to sell for $900,000? What is low income? How do they do it? They don't know. My guest is Mimi Steele. This is KSFO. We'll be right back on KSFO. Barbara Simpson here in Hot Talk 560 KSFO. By the way, I mentioned that I would give you the contact information for my guest, Mimi Steele, and the website is Meetup, MEETUP, meetup.com/SFBay912. That's the name of the organization, SFBay912. So meetup.com/SFBay912, or just go to BayAreaLiberty.org, BayAreaLiberty.org, and the Twitter is at 9112Cal, C-A-L, Gal, 9112 CalGal. So you can do that, and we'll also give you the information about that event that's coming up in the November 5th on a Saturday. My guest is Mimi Steele, and we're talking. Mimi, you said two words that you wanted to touch on that people need to know in terms of terminology. Delphi technique. What is that?
Delphi technique is a methodology that was developed by the Rand Corporation to develop what's called consensus. Mm-hmm. And consensus is an interesting term, because basically what it means is that they have decided, the people who put these things together, like the One Bay Area program, they've decided what they want the outcome to be. So they want to bring you in and supposedly get your input, but they've already determined what the outcome is. And so they set the system up so that they herd you into making the kinds of decisions that they want you to make. Mm-hmm. I can give you a good example. When we went to the visioning session, that's another component. The visioning sessions are sessions to get public input, quote unquote.
They have these public meetings. People come on. We're going to talk about, the future of our town council or of our town center kind of thing.
Exactly. They did the first set of those in the spring. There's another set that's supposed to be coming up, I think, in the January timeframe. We don't have any dates. But let me just give you an example. When they did the visioning sessions in the spring, they had 14 questions that they asked you, and they asked you to prioritize one. So the first one was, do you like clean air?
Oh, no, I hate it.
I know. Do you want to conserve open space? Mm-hmm. So what they do is they make these terms, they make these statements. They don't define them. In fact, if I could just make a plug, we have a great videographer. His name is Steve Kemp, and we go in there and we videotape all of these meetings. And if somebody wants to see these things in action, if they go to youtube.com and /Tea Party Television, they can see the meetings that we went to, both the visioning meetings and the MTC meetings.
All right, tell us that again. Yes, youtube.com /Tea Party.
Tea Party Television.
Television, okay.
And there are a lot of videos on there. And so, for example, they'll say, do you want to conserve water? And they'll give you a choice, A, B, or C. Well, I want D. I want to build more dams. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that's not one of the choices.
I see, yeah.
So the Delphi technique is a methodology really of herding people. They try to make it so that you don't even know it's happening. And then if you start to object or ask a question, then they will try to marginalize you. They'll try to shut you up. One of the videos on there is a great video of Heather asking the question about open space. It's a really quick 2-minute video. And she says, what is open space? That could be somebody's private property. And they said, well, don't worry about that. Just vote.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, and this is going on everywhere. I've gone to a couple of them, and I just found it fascinating. The other thing that struck me as I was looking into this, this was a couple of years ago, that this is all over the world. This is not just California. This is literally all over the world. I found this whole thing going on in Australia. So I mean, it is an international effort, isn't it, Mimi?
Yes, it is. And I really want to make a comment. The reason Heather and I decided to do these training sessions is you can't do this by yourself. These are trained facilitators. They have an agenda. They're going to roll right over you. And so it's really important, if you want to help in this effort to stop this craziness, that you team up with somebody. And we've got groups all around the Bay Area that are starting to get involved in this. And even if you're not somebody who wants to go to a meeting, maybe you could help us do some research. Or maybe you could, help talk to your neighbors. There's a lot of things we need people to do to get the word out.
And they can contact you. What's the best way? One of the websites that I gave out?
If they go to the BayAreaLiberty.org.
Okay.
There's a Join Us, which means they would sign up and get my newsletter, or they can go to Contact Us, and there's a place for presentations or info or volunteers.
And if somebody wants to have this program done in their community, they can contact you to help organize it and get it set up.
Exactly.
That's terrific. Let's go to Bill in Berkeley. Quick comment on KSFO. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Barbara, thanks very much. Boy, great program.
Good.
Earlier in the program, a term was mentioned, carrying capacity.
Yes.
That's an agricultural term. How many animals can sustain themselves for a year on an acre of ground?
Okay.
They're discussing animals. They're comparing us to animals is how far they've gone down. Thanks very much, Barbara.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Very good. No, actually,
if I could make a comment
Please.
to that.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So part of, if you really get way out on this trajectory of where they're going with this, what they're doing is they're taking farmers off the land, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
They're trying to put people in these urban centers, and then they have this thing called local growing, and they don't want people to transport food all across the country. So they want to, at some point, get to the point where you can only eat stuff that's within grown within a 150-mile area of your urban center. So that gets into the issue of, again, the carrying capacity. And then you go, well, okay, so how many people can you put in this urban center? And what if I want to move? Or what if I want to have a kid? I mean, there are just all kinds of questions that people aren't asking, that the implications of this are astounding.
And of course, the other aspect of it is, I mean, we're here in California with a relatively mild climate. I grew up in New Jersey. I lived in Michigan. I lived in Colorado.
Right.
They've got pretty stiff winters. If I can only eat what can be grown within 150 miles of my house in the middle of December in the Rocky Mountains, I'm going to be eating pine needles.
Yeah. That brings up another issue. You're probably in the wildlands area, and you shouldn't even be living there.
Well, that's right. I forgot. You got to stay out of that. Leave it for the end. That's another issue entirely. There's no end to this, is there, Mimi?
Not.
No, there isn't. Let's go quickly to Dale in Brentwood. Go ahead, Dale.
Hi. This you've been talking about. Okay, I live in Brentwood. I was a farmer in Brentwood many years, right?
Okay.
And now I actually sold all my land, right? Well, a good portion of it to developers when it was being developed in the last few years.
Okay.
And there was no control at all, okay? I made so much money, I'll be honest with you, okay? I can't even, okay. And so you're talking about smart this and smart that, right? Well, we need some smart, I don't care where it comes from, because to get to the root cause, okay? If you look at developers are making a fortune, the landowners are making a fortune. I've made over almost 2,000% increase in property that I owned.
How long do you have the land, Dale?
I had the land. I bought several pieces. I had one piece for about 25 years.
Okay. Are you embarrassed by how much money you made?
No, I'm not embarrassed.
Oh, good. Okay.
No, Not at all.
Well, I mean, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. You had the land for that length of time. You paid money on it. You paid taxes on it. You used it however you used it. When the time comes to sell it, if you make a profit, that's fine. If the developers make a profit, that's fine. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the towns and communities that are putting restrictions on how the land can be used. If they told you, Dale, that you cannot sell your land to a developer because they want it to be open space, would you be a happy camper?
No, but see, it's more than what you just said, okay? I actually put up some houses, okay? And the only reason I did it, because it's also city councils, right? Town councils, all right? And the town council, they have a lot of power.
Sure they do.
And there's a lot of things that happen there that should not happen.
That's right.
But I'm telling you, okay, is that you cannot, if you're thinking that you can, like, leave things alone, or that things are going to be better if there's nobody overseeing this stuff, or if there's... No,
we never said nobody overseeing it. We're talking about people like you and other property owners, or anybody being forced into where you live and how you live, or in fact what is done with your property.
Well, let me give you an example.
We don't have a lot of time. Can you do it very quickly?
Yeah, I can. Okay.
Good.
Brentwood, all right?
Yeah.
They got shopping malls, whatever. A lot of money been made. Not, by people with money, property, period. But they also have a lot of housing. Those housings don't even have roads, okay? And who gives a damn, really, on that?
Well, that's your...
Money is being made. Money is being made.
If they allow a housing development to be built with no roads, there's something radically wrong with the planning department. Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure whether he's happy or upset over the development and the land. But the problem really is, Mimi, as I can see it, is that you also have people who have land, and then somebody changes a law or a regulation, and the government comes in and says, sorry, you can't do anything with your land. Your land has zero value, or God forbid you have an endangered snake or mouse on your property. You are screwed.
Oh, Barbara, you pick a perfect example. We have a rancher out in Livermore whose land has been in his family for 4 generations. He got zoned out of the urban boundary. That's another term that's used. And if you're in the urban boundary, you can develop. If you're outside of the urban boundary, you can't develop. He can't even put buildings on his property for his sons. Because they've zoned him out of the urban boundary. Now, the other thing about that is that his land had a certain value back when that other guy was talking about how he sold his land to developers. This guy cannot sell his land to developers. If it had been developable, we had been told it was worth maybe about $7 million. Now it's worth less than $1 million because of the zoning restrictions. And nobody paid him for that. That was not taken by eminent domain. That was what I had talked about when we first started, about an administrative taking. They essentially made it so that he could not use his land or get the value of his land, but nobody paid him for it. And that's going on all over. The other thing I want to say, too, is that 94, they always say, well, there's too much growth, there's too much sprawl, all this other stuff. 94% of California is rural. We're not running out of land.
Yeah, and there's no question that land has been misdeveloped, at least in my opinion, where, they maybe put in too many houses too close together. But usually that's because, as you said, somebody was greasing the skids for the builder and the town planning commission and the town, and those things get pushed through. But just because those misadventures happen doesn't mean that everything should be open space, including my backyard.
Correct.
Which is what they're trying to do. Craig in Pleasanton, you're on KSFO with Barbara Simpson. My guest, Mimi Steele.
Hello, Mimi and Barbara. You guys are the greatest Tea Party saviors since the founding dads came along, because we're really vigilant.
All right, go ahead.
Pleasanton Forum ran exactly what Mimi was saying. I was there. We tried to ask the pertinent questions as to why are we here. Well, the big reason was Jerry Brown, as Attorney General, was suing the city of Pleasanton because we did not have enough global greenhouse gas initiatives in place or enough low-income housing, which battle us into a program of more entitlement folks getting something for free on the backs of those who are working for it.
Amazing.
The easiest to start is the war between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, it's all part of the same thing. Thank you, Craig. There was, I'm sure, a learning experience, as they say, when you go to meetings like that. Going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on KSFO. My guest, Mimi Steele, try to get as many calls in as we can, and I promise you we'll do this again. 808-5600.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. My guest is Mimi Steele. Mimi, you sent me a couple of pictures of a meeting that was an MTC bag meeting with some people there standing up holding signs, and you were talking about they were members of ACORN and some other organizations. What was that about?
So, Barbara,
this was a June 22nd meeting that you said is also on tape.
Yes, that's correct. There was a June 17th meeting and a June 22nd meeting, and the purpose of the June 17th meeting was to review the visioning sessions and approve the 5 scenarios they had for development. And we went to that June 17th meeting. They weren't expecting us. They were quite flustered that we showed up. And we asked them questions about what is social equity, why are you doing this, what you presented isn't really what happened in the visioning sessions. And so they delayed their meeting and they delayed a decision until the June 22nd meeting. Mm-hmm. So at the June 22nd meeting, the people from the social justice groups were ready for us. And so they showed up with these orange signs that say, I support the social equity scenario. And there was a gentleman named Carl Anthony who got up and spoke, and we've got that on videotape, and he talked about the need for social equity. Well, I started looking into him, and Carl Anthony was given an award by the Ella Baker Center. That's a Van Jones organization. He's the head of a group called Urban Habitat. They have a $1.7 million budget to help get people involved in supporting transportation issues. They even have a thing called transportation justice. Mm. And the people in that picture, some of them have yellow shirts on.
Yeah, they do.
The shirts say ACCES, and that stands for the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, and that is what ACORN in California morphed into after the whistle got blown on them.
Wow.
So what happened was they took ACORN, and in every different state they reorganized under a different name, so it's a lot harder to track them. But Judicial Watch just came out with an analysis of all of the names that they are now under in each state, and that's the California thing. The other thing that's really interesting is I was cruising around on the internet one day, and I found a video. I think it's called Bay Area Sustainability or something like that. And in the video, it talks about basically the One Bay Area plan. And if you go through that, about halfway through the video, who should appear there but Van Jones?
What was he saying?
He didn't say anything. It was just his picture as part of, they were talking about how great the green growth was going to be in the Bay Area and how wonderful it was.
Is there full support by, say, the Board of Supervisors in the county of San Francisco and Alameda County and Contra Costa County? Have they all taken positions on these things, too?
I don't know the answer to that question. Basically, what happens is that there are ABAG and MTC supposedly have representatives from each city. They've got 2 representatives from each city, but there are only 15 people who actually sit on that board. So, for example, if you're in Santa Clara County, there's a guy named Dave Cortez who's on the Board of Supervisors, and another guy named Sam Liccardo who is a city council member. Those are the only 2 people representing all of Santa Clara County. And I know for a fact that both of these guys are in bed with this whole project. So you're really not represented, and there's no way you can really get at these people to vote them out because they're chosen from their city to be on this board.
Sounds like the fix is in to me.
The fix is in, Barbara. Unless the only way this is going to turn around, and I will say the law is on their side. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, AB 32 and SB 375, their excuse is going to be, well, it's the law and we have to implement it. The only thing that's going to save this is if enough people understand what's going on and raise enough of an outrage at this. That this is going to get turned, because if we sit down, we're going to be enslaved.
It's astonishing. Very quickly, Fernando in East Palo Alto. Fernando, welcome to the program on KSFO.
Hey, ladies, how you guys doing?
Good.
Just real quick, I want to commend you guys for touching on the subject. You're basically lifting the hood on the New World Order, and you're showing us what the gears and the mechanisms are for this movement that basically it's a thousand individual elites trying to control 300 million people in this country.
Yeah.
And we're being lulled into the fact that they don't have to hurt us into any kind of concentration camp. They're slowly but surely they're building it around us.
Yeah.
And if we don't wake up, there's going to be a point where we can't even organize. We won't be able to fight them, and we're repeating what happened in Germany.
Interesting way of phrasing that. Thank you, Fernando. I like that, Mimi, that they are slowly building the concentration camps around us.
He's exactly right. And I'd like to make a plug for my buddy Rosa Corey. You mentioned her originally.
Yes.
She's behind Democrats Against UN Agenda 21. This is not a partisan issue. This is anybody who owns property should be very concerned. And she just published a book called Behind the Green Mask, and she might be it's a good book for people to take a look at. She talks about what happened in Santa Rosa. She gives action items, and she might be another good one for you to have on your program at some point.
We will definitely check it out. Let me put you on hold. We'll be right back. One more quick break right here on KSFO.
You're listening to Barbara Simpson on Hot Talk 560 KSFO.
Barbara Simpson here on Hot Talk 560 KSFO. Do check the program summary for my program on KSFO.com, and you find out about a couple of these meetings that are coming up that Mimi Steele was telling us about. We're not going to get every call in, but we'll try. Chris in Vacaville, very quickly, go ahead. You're on KSFO with Barbara and Mimi.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Mimi. I really enjoy your guys' show, and it's really great tonight, or your show, Barbara.
Thank you.
But I feel like I disagree on this subject just because having grown up in Vacaville and then being stationed down in San Diego and seeing the urban sprawl in Southern California, you just really get a sense of that happening here in Northern California. And I'm not necessarily saying I disagree on the political side, but on the theory of urban growth or suburban growth, it just seems like the developers have the upper hand, and a lot of these beautiful areas up here, or anywhere for that matter, are, once they're gone, they're gone forever. And
Chris, I would agree with you. I am not for just building everywhere at all, although you may think I am, because it sounds I'm in favor of what Mimi is saying. We're talking about, if the developers have the upper hand, that means they are caving in that your town councils, your planning commissions, your county board of supervisors, all these people are supposed to put checks on the type of growth that you have in areas, are allowing themselves to be bought off. That's corruption. That's the problem, not whether or not we can build some houses. Mimi, would you agree? Am I wrong? This is my thinking on this. What do you think in light of what Chris just said?
I agree, Barbara, absolutely. There's an issue of reasonableness on this. Nobody wants to have sprawl, but the bottom line is they're just going the opposite direction. They're squeezing us, and so there's got to be some kind of balance somewhere. And as you said, there's no check and balance at this point. It's all going one way.
Yeah, Chris, do you see the difference of what we're talking about?
Yeah, I definitely do, and I appreciate the difference. But I kind of find myself appreciating when they do go into some of these, I don't want to say inner cities per se, but inner towns, inner cities, and reestablish them, versus just building outward and kind of forgetting about, developments that were built 30 years ago on the core of a town.
Let me ask you this. Do you own any property?
Yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I I own the house here in Vacaville, and then I own a couple acres up in Oregon.
Okay, and would you like the government or some agency of the government that's not even elected to come in and tell you that your couple acres up in Oregon you can't do anything with, not even put a cabin on it?
Of course not.
Well, but you see, this is what's happening. And this is the kind of thing that Mimi and her people are talking about and what I'm talking about. This happens more often than you know. You're looking at the huge developments in Southern California. I've seen them too. I've seen them here in Alameda County and in Contra Costa County and up towards Fairfield in that area. And I see these houses going up like monopoly houses. I hate it. I wouldn't want to live in one of them, but that's what they want us to live in so that I have to give up my house with my backyard. That's the difference. Finding the balance, Chris, I would urge you to check out some of these websites, do some research on it, and we'll talk more. I promise you. We're just about out of time, but thank you so much. You bet. And actually, I mean, what he says, Mimi, is really important because on the one hand, nobody wants door-to-door houses. And we all love, for the most part, a beautiful park or some beautiful hills and the cows on the hills and all of that. There's got to be a balance, and we've lost the balance.
Yes, exactly. You're right. And, I want to say that, for example, what's being defined as unsustainable is things like single-family homes, private transportation, private property, land use for recreation like a golf course or a ski lodge, fossil fuels. I mean, this is just a complete change in lifestyle for the American people. And the other thing I want to point out, too, is you talk about sprawl. We say that there's such a thing as vertical sprawl, which is just stacking people on top of each other. And the irony with this One Bay Area plan is that even Berkeley got upset with it because they want to put 35,000 more people in downtown Berkeley.
35,000?
Pardon?
35,000?
Yeah, that's in the One Bay Area plan.
Wow. And how did Berkeley react?
They didn't like it.
No kidding. But it'll be interesting to watch that to see whether they cave in or not.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. But see, this is what people don't realize. I think of places like you see old pictures of what New York looked like back in the colonial days and what it looks like now. According to these people, I guess, is New York development and all those high rises good or bad? I'm not sure how they would vote on that.
Well, and the joke about New York with all that high density, they have probably the most cars per meter or
yeah.
I mean, this is supposedly smart growth, and yet they have all of these cars. It's just not realistic.
And they have no place for them. The traffic is terrible. Parking is inordinately expensive if you can even find it. But they have a similar situation here in San Francisco where they were giving out permits to build buildings, but no parking at all allowed. So then what are people supposed to do with their cars? What they want is for you to get rid of them.
Right, or use the zip car. It's a complete change of lifestyle. When you think about cars really are freedom.
Yes.
You can get in a car and go wherever and whenever you want, and that's your freedom, and they do not like that.
Well, that really is sort of the history of the United States, is that we had the freedom, and you didn't have to stop at the borders. You could drive anywhere freely and nobody could stop you. And they're trying to put, kibosh on that. I'm very sorry we can't get to everybody's call, even John and Pat and the other ones, but we will have Mimi back again. Mimi, tell us now about this event that's coming up that people can come to.
Okay, it's in Cotati, and it's November 5th. And probably the best thing to do would be to go to the North Bay Patriots website to get the details. But it's a 4-hour training session. The first 2 hours will be getting people up to speed about what One Bay Area is and what the Delphi technique is. And then the second 2 hours will be hands-on workshops on how you can actually get involved and help us and try to get this thing stopped.
And it is free. You are going to provide snacks and water, but to bring your own lunch with you or eat before you get there. And if you want to make a donation, it's fine. But if you can't afford it, that's okay too, right?
Exactly.
Very good. Well, listen, I want to thank you. I didn't plan on this going on as much as it did, but a very important issue, as you know and I know, and judging by the reaction from my audience, we had a full board for the whole 2 hours, and so that's fabulous. We will do it again. Mimi Steele, thank you for your hard work.
Thank you for your time, Barbara, and for helping us get the word out.
Absolutely, and getting the word out is very, very important, and that's part of what we do here. You know, I'm not just a hellraiser. I'm not just out here criticizing everybody. I think that we need to be informed. And then, as I said, and this is kind of what Mimi is doing with these, she calls them the tactical training sessions on preserving private property, so that you understand what we're up against. And the truth is, the average person does not know. I have heard these people come to community meetings and come to town meetings and lie through their teeth. And people just sit there and listen, and the elected officials just sit there and listen, and they buy into it, and they have no idea of what and if they do have an idea of what they're getting into, then they are part of the plot against freedom, because that's what it is. When you have a government agency, a bureaucratic agency that is unelected using taxpayer money to enforce regulations, it's out of control. And the bigger question is, why isn't there anybody in Sacramento, in the legislature, with the courage to stand up and say something and speak out against it? And there doesn't seem to be. There just does not seem to be. Nobody with the cojones to say, wait a second, this is wrong. Now, we had these laws that were passed. It is destroying small businesses. We talked about the effect of the diesel regulations on small businesses which need trucks, whether it's a trucking firm or a company that uses trucks to move product or move their supplies and get their help. You know, a plumber has a truck, that type of thing. If they put the strongest restrictions on you, you can't afford to convert the engines. You had the caller earlier who is being priced out of her car because of the smog restrictions. That's what they want. They're making, each time they make them a little bit harder to pass, and hopefully their goal is to have all those, quote, old cars off the roads, because they're the ones that are creating the havoc. Not necessarily. A lot of those old cars, the engines are very, very good, but they've made passing the test almost impossible. So we will talk more about this. Check on the website for this contact information. But BayAreaLiberty.org is a good way to find out about it. And the Twitter is at 9112 CalGal. And that'll get you through, too. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Pamela Geller will be with us tomorrow. Stop the Islamization of America, a practical guide to the resistance against Sharia and Islamization of this country. Check my column on Monday on WorldNetDaily.com. It'll be there. I'll be here tomorrow. And as always, be careful what you pray for. You might get it.
Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, and Brian Sussman. KSFO Radio, San Francisco, a Cumulus station.